Is this the secret reason why long-range missiles have been fired deep into Russian territory? Michael Snyder reports, when it comes to the world of geopolitics, there's always far more going on than meets the eye. The long-range missiles that Ukraine is firing into Russian territory are not going to change the course of the war, but the Russian response to those long-range missiles might. Hopefully the Russians will show restraint because they may not even realize that they are being led into a trap. Just 2 days after Joe Biden gave the green light, Ukraine fired 6 Atacam missiles deep into Russian territory on Tuesday. Ukraine hit a Russian weapons arsenal with U.S.-made Atacams missiles that it fired across the border for the first time, according to 2 U.S. officials, and a major escalation on the 1,000th day of the war. The attack comes just 2 days after Biden administration gave Kiev the green light to use the longer-range American weapons against targets inside Russia. The Russians possess the most sophisticated anti-missile systems on the entire planet by a wide margin, and they were able to shoot down 5 of the missiles and damage the 6th before it reached the target. At 3:25 local time, a.m., Tuesday, Ukraine fired 6 ballistic missiles at a facility in Bryansk, Russia's defense minister said. It said that American-made Atacam missiles had been used in the attack. Russian air defenses said they shot down 5 of the missiles and another was damaged. Fragments from the damaged missile fell on the territory of a military facility, causing a fire that has since been extinguished, and there were no casualties or damage. Since there were no casualties and no damage, the Russians will hopefully not feel a need to respond to this particular strike. But what is going to happen next time? And how will they respond when Russian cities start getting targeted? Following the attack, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov pointed out that the Ukrainians cannot operate these high-tech missile systems without U.S. assistance. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov responded to the attack, accusing the West of wanting to escalate the conflict. He said the fact that Atacams were used repeatedly tonight in the Bryansk region is, of course, a signal that they in the West want escalation. And without the Americans, it is impossible to use these high-tech missiles, end quote. This is what Lavrov said at news conference at the G20 summit, according to comments reported by TASS and translated by Google. To the Russians, when Atacam missiles are fired into their territory, it's a joint attack by Ukraine and the United States. And we're being warned that Russians could use nuclear weapons in response. On Tuesday, Vladimir Putin signed a document which updates Russia's official nuclear doctrine. The Kremlin has repeatedly warned the West against allowing Ukraine to use its long-range weapons to attack Russia directly. Moscow upped the ante Tuesday as Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree approving its updated nuclear doctrine, shifting the parameters on when Russia can use nuclear weapons. The timing of this signing was meant to be a signal. According to this document, Russia reserves the right to use nuclear weapons if there is a missile attack by any non-nuclear state with the participation or support of a nuclear state. You will be able to read the paragraph yourself, but in general, it also states that the Russian Federation reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in the event of aggression with the use of conventional weapons against it or the Republic of Belarus, which creates a critical threat to sovereignty or territorial integrity, Peskov told reporters. Aggression against the Russian Federation by any non-nuclear state with the participation or support of a nuclear state is considered a joint attack. That's clearly directed at us, the United States. The Russians are trying to warn us that we are dangerously close to starting a nuclear war. One Russian military official is even suggesting that the UK could be the first target. Andrei Gurulev, a reservist Russian army general, MP and pro-Putin TV propagandist, warned of a full-scale nuclear strike on Britain. There are individual targets that can be hit with demonstrative warning strikes, he said. The first candidate to get a nuclear bludgeon is the UK, he said. I disagree, says Michael Snyder. If the Russians decide to use nuclear weapons, Ukraine will likely be the first target. If Russian cities get hit by long-range missiles, the Russians would be very tempted to respond by hitting Ukraine with a tactical nuke. Of course, the Biden administration has already strongly hinted that if the Russians use tactical nukes in Ukraine, we will respond by using tactical nukes in Ukraine too. That would mean a full-blown war between the United States and Russia, and that is precisely what the Ukrainians want, because that gives them the best chance of actually winning the conflict. And could that be exactly what the global elite are wishing for too? When he heard that Ukraine had been given the green light to launch long-range missiles to Russia, Alex Soros was absolutely thrilled. He said, "This is great news." This is what he put on Twitter. Wall Street Journal says, breaking, President Biden has for the first time authorized Ukrainian forces to use Western-made long-range weapons to strike inside Russia. The Economist has just published their outlook for 2025, and they appear to think that the war in Ukraine will be a major theme during the coming year. If the global elite can trigger a direct war between the United States and Russia before Donald Trump takes office, it may become nearly impossible for him to stop it once he gets into the White House. Because it is not just the left that has a really bad case of war fever, quote unquote, right now. Many prominent Republican members of Congress have a really bad case of war fever too. For example, just consider something that Mitch McConnell just said. U.S. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell sharply criticized the Biden administration for delaying announcing its decision to allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles to hit targets inside Russia. McConnell said the administration had what he called unsubstantiated fears of escalation. McConnell potentially said history will record hesitation, indecision, and cowardice as the hallmarks of this administration's Ukraine policy from the beginning. The neocons want this conflict and war, and they're convinced that the Russians will never actually fire nuclear missiles at the United States. In fact, just about everyone in Washington, D.C. seems to think that the Russians are bluffing. But if they are bluffing, why have they begun serial production of mobile bomb shelters? Mobile bomb shelters. Russia has begun serial production of mobile bomb shelters that can protect against a variety of threats, including shock waves and radiation from a nuclear blast. The Emergency Ministries Research Institute said the KUBM shelter could offer protection for 48 hours against these and other natural and man-made hazards. I realize that a lot of people out there do not believe this, but the truth is that the Russians are quite serious about nuclear war. As I've discussed in my books, the Russians now know that there are no winners in a nuclear war, but they also understand that whoever strikes first will have the best chance of surviving a nuclear war if one becomes inevitable. Many U.S. officials assume that since we would never conduct the first strike, the Russians would not either. That is a tragic mistake. If we keep crossing the red lines that the Russians have established, we will eventually find out that they weren't bluffing at all. This is by Michael Snyder on the Economic Collapse blog. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. About the author, Michael Snyder's new book, Why, is available on paperback and for Kindle on Amazon. He's also written 8 other books available on Amazon, including Chaos, End Times, 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophets of the Future of America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters. When you purchase any of Michael's books, you help to support the work that he's doing. You can also get his articles by email as soon as he publishes them by subscribing to his Substack newsletter. Michael has published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and the Most Important News, and he always freely, happily allows others to republish those articles on their own websites. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, we strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.